Admiral Zixtal's four-fingered hand traced patterns in the condensation forming on the flagship's observation window. Beyond the reinforced transparent aluminum, Earth's orbital space buzzed with activity that defied all logical explanation. The Admiral's secondary eyes tracked a particularly erratic civilian transport, while their primary set remained fixed on the detailed sensor readings floating in their neural display. "Impossible," they muttered, their crystalline antennae vibrating with confusion. "Run the analysis again." Lieutenant Venra's fingers danced across the holographic interface. "Fourth analysis complete, Admiral. Results unchanged. Their hull material is primarily aluminum alloy with minimal exotic element content. Propulsion systems are basic fusion drives. No inertial dampeners detected. Weapon systems," they paused, double-checking the readings, "appear to be completely absent." The civilian transport they were watching suddenly executed a perfect spiral maneuver through a dense field of construction debris, missing every piece by meters while maintaining its cargo's stability. According to every principle of physics the Meridian Confederation had developed over 12 centuries of space travel, the ship's structural integrity should have failed instantly. The G-forces alone should have liquefied any organic crew. Yet here they are, dancing through the void like solar sprites. Zixtal said, their outer membrane shifting to a deeper shade of blue in contemplation. "How long has this species been in space?" "Official records indicate their first orbital flight was less than 300 years ago," Venra replied. "First lunar landing 256 years ago. First Mars colony established 184 years ago. Their expansion rate is unprecedented." Zixtal's antennae twitched as another ship caught their attention. This one was clearly military, its hull bearing the angular geometry of human combat vessels. It was conducting what appeared to be a routine patrol, but its movement patterns were unlike anything in the Confederation's tactical database. "Show me the projected course of that patrol vessel," the Admiral commanded. A holographic overlay appeared in their neural display, showing the complex web of intersecting paths the human ship would cover in its patrol route. It was beautiful in its irregularity, like a crystal growing in zero gravity. Yet there was clearly purpose behind the chaos. Their patrol patterns contain no repeated elements, Venra observed. Each pass is unique, yet maintains optimal sensor coverage of their defense grid. It's almost as if they're playing with different approaches each time. Zixtal finished. "Run a comparison with standard Confederation patrol protocols." The analysis appeared instantly in their shared neural space. Confederation patterns were precise, mathematically optimal, and utterly predictable. The human patterns achieved the same coverage with 3.8% less efficiency, but would be nearly impossible to ambush or analyze for weaknesses. "Fascinating," Zixtal said. "They sacrifice perfect efficiency for tactical advantage, yet their methods don't appear in any of their military documents. How are they developing these techniques?" The bridge fell silent as a new vessel emerged from Earth's atmosphere. It was huge, easily rivaling the Meridian flagship in size, yet its construction was visibly crude by Confederation standards. The sensor readings were even more puzzling than before. "Sir," Venra's voice carried an edge of disbelief, "that vessel's hull is partially composed of recycled shipping containers. Humans call it the Alexander," their cultural advisor, Dr. Meltic, interjected. "It's their first long-range colony ship, constructed entirely in orbit using materials lifted from their planet's surface. The design was apparently crowdsourced through something called the Global Space Initiative." Zixtal watched as the massive vessel performed its drive tests, its movements precise despite its seemingly haphazard construction. "How many crew?" 5,000 colonists, 200 technical staff, Dr. Meltic answered. "Many of them civilians with no formal space training." The Admiral's membrane rippled with shades of confusion and curiosity. In 3 hours, they would make humanity's first official contact with galactic civilization. The diplomatic protocols were clear, the ceremonies planned to the smallest detail. Yet standing here, Watching these impossibly crude ships perform impossibly elegant maneuvers, Zixtal couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something fundamental about this species. "Begin recording personal log," they commanded softly. Initial observations of human space activity suggest significant discrepancies between their technological level and operational capabilities. Standard evaluation protocols may be insufficient. Requesting permission to extend the observation period and modify first contact procedures. There is something very unusual about these humans, and I intend to discover what it is. The human shopping complex was a sensory assault that made Admiral Zixtal's environmental filters work overtime. Their diplomatic escort droned on about commerce statistics and cultural exchange, but the Admiral's attention kept drifting to the crowds of humans moving through the space with chaotic efficiency. Like their ships, their movements seemed random yet purposeful. "And this section houses recreational facilities for juvenile humans," the escort explained, gesturing toward a particularly noisy corridor. "We can bypass this area if you prefer, Admiral." A burst of excited shouts drew Zixtal's secondary eyes. Through the entrance of one establishment, they caught glimpses of moving lights and heard what seemed to be simulated weapon fire. Their antennae vibrated with recognition. The sounds were remarkably similar to Confederation training simulations. "Actually," Zixtal said, their membranes shifting to a shade of diplomatic amber, "I would like to observe these recreational facilities." The escort's face showed what humans called concern. "Sir, the arcade is quite loud and chaotic. Perhaps the botanical gardens would be more appropriate for someone of your station." "Chaos seems to be humanity's natural state," Zixtal replied. "I wish to understand it better." Without waiting for a response, they moved toward the arcade entrance, their ceremonial robes shimmering under the neon lights. The interior was even more overwhelming. Dozens of humans, mostly juveniles, clustered around various machines. Some devices simulated ground combat, others appeared to be physics puzzles, but what caught Zixtal's attention was a row of enclosed pods along the back wall. Each pod was roughly the size of a small shuttle cockpit, with holographic controls wrapping around the pilot's seat. Most were empty, except for the last one, a human child. Female, approximately 12 Earth years old, sat absorbed in what appeared to be a space combat simulation. Her small hands moved across the controls with practiced precision, and her eyes tracked multiple holographic displays simultaneously. Zixtal approached quietly, their escort forgotten. The simulation running on the pod's main screen showed a complex asteroid field. The child's ship was weaving through it while under pursuit by 3 enemy vessels. The scenario was remarkably similar to the Rigel Gambit, a notorious tactical challenge used in advanced Confederation training. The girl's ship suddenly cut power, rotated 180 degrees while maintaining its vector, and fired its maneuvering thrusters in a pattern that caused several asteroids to shift their orbits slightly. The pursuing ships, following standard evasion protocols, flew right into the altered asteroid paths. Game over. Yes, the girl pumped her fist in celebration. New high score. She turned and noticed Zixtal standing there. Instead of showing fear at the sight of a 2-meter-tall crystalline alien, she beamed. "Want to try? It's really fun once you get used to the controls." Zixtal's universal translator took a moment to process her casual tone. "That maneuver you just performed," they said carefully. "Where did you learn it?" "Oh, the asteroid shuffle. I made it up last week. The key is to calculate the orbital mechanics just right so the rocks go where you want. Did you want me to show you how?" Before Zixtal could respond, a new simulation began. This one featured a disabled passenger liner near a gas giant's atmosphere. The girl's ship had to match velocity and establish a rescue corridor while dealing with atmospheric turbulence and gravitational forces. "This is my favorite scenario," she explained, hands already dancing across the controls. "You have to be super careful with the approach vector because of the Coriolis effect from the gas giant's rotation. Plus, you need to maintain power reserves for the emergency shield bubble during passenger transfer." Zixtal's antennae went rigid. The girl was casually describing complex rescue procedures that had taken the Confederation decades to perfect, and she was executing them flawlessly while chatting with a stranger. "What is your designation?" they asked. "I'm Sarah," she replied, not taking her eyes off the simulation. "Dad says I'm not supposed to talk to strangers, but you're an alien admiral, so that's probably okay. Besides, anyone who's interested in starship mechanics can't be bad, right?" Sarah's ship aligned perfectly with the disabled liner, her shield harmonics automatically adjusting to the atmospheric conditions. As the simulated passengers began their transfer, Zixtal's diplomatic facade cracked slightly, their membrane flickering with shades of astonishment and dawning comprehension. This wasn't just a game. This was something far more significant, and Zixtal intended to find out exactly what humanity was doing with these recreational facilities. Admiral Zixtal's neural implants worked overtime, recording and analyzing every move Sarah made in the simulation. Their diplomatic escort had long since given up trying to redirect the tour, and now stood awkwardly near the arcade's entrance, occasionally whispering into a communication device. "Watch this," Sarah said, her fingers flying across the holographic controls. "They just added solar wind dynamics in the last update. You can use the particle density to boost your shield frequency if you time it right." The Admiral's antennae quivered as they watched Sarah's ship dive through the corona of a virtual star. The maneuver she was attempting had an official designation in Confederation tactical databases, the Horvath Defense Pattern. It had been developed by Admiral Horvath herself after 3 decades of studying stellar phenomena. Yet here was a human child, casually improving upon it while simultaneously explaining the underlying physics. "Your understanding of stellar mechanics is impressive," Zixtal said carefully, their outer membrane shifting through shades of analytical blue. "Is this knowledge common among human younglings?" Sarah shrugged, executing a perfect slingshot maneuver around the star's magnetic pole. "Most of my friends play Stellar Frontier. It's pretty popular. Though my brother says the orbital mechanics are way too forgiving compared to real spaceflight." She grinned. "He's just mad because I beat his high score last week." Zixtal's secondary eyes tracked the simulation's telemetry data, while their primary set focused on Sarah's casual confidence. "You compete with others in these scenarios?" "Oh yeah, there's global leaderboards and everything." "See." Sarah tapped a floating display, bringing up a sprawling network of statistics and rankings. "These are the top scores for the Proxima Challenge. That's my username there, Stardancer42. I'm ranked 3rd globally in the rescue operations category." The Admiral's neural implants pinged urgently as they processed this information. The scenario database was massive, containing hundreds of thousands of completed simulations. Each one represented a complex space operation, executed successfully by humans who thought they were just playing a game. "How long have you been playing?" they asked. "Since I was 6, Sarah replied, now deftly navigating her ship through a complex docking procedure. "Mom got me started on the basic orbital mechanics sims. Said if I was going to spend time gaming, might as well learn something useful." She laughed, "Though I didn't really get good until I started watching the pro streams." Pro streams? Professional players. They do these amazing tournaments where they have to handle multiple system emergencies while defending against pirates and maintaining optimal fuel efficiency. It's super intense. Sarah's eyes lit up. "There's one happening next week at the Space Center. You should come watch." The finalists are doing a special challenge where they have to evacuate a damaged station during a solar storm. Zixtal's membrane rippled with barely contained shock. They had accessed human entertainment broadcasts during their pre-contact research, but had dismissed the esports phenomenon as simple recreational content. Now, watching Sarah casually execute maneuvers that would qualify her for command training in the Confederation fleet, they realized their error. A new simulation began, this one featuring an asteroid mining operation gone wrong. Sarah's ship had to navigate through a field of magnetically charged ore while managing radiation levels and coordinating with AI-controlled rescue boats. "This one's tough," she explained, already plotting an approach vector. "The magnetic fields mess with your sensors, so you have to rely on visual navigation and gut instinct. Plus, the rescue boats use really basic AI, so you have to position yourself in ways that help guide them through the debris field." Zixtal's antennae went completely still, a sign of intense focus among their species. Sarah wasn't just solving the immediate challenge. She was independently developing advanced fleet coordination tactics, compensating for the limitations of automated systems, and doing it all through intuition developed by countless hours of play. "Tell me, Sarah," they said slowly, "how many others play these simulations?" "Oh, millions probably. It's not even the most popular space sim out there. Galaxy Command has way more players, but I like this one better. The physics are more realistic." Millions, millions of humans, many of them children, all unknowingly training in advanced space operations through what they thought was entertainment. The implications were staggering. Zixtal's diplomatic training screamed for them to leave, to report this discovery immediately to the Confederation. But their scientific curiosity won out. They had to understand how deep this went. "Sarah," they said, their voice carrying a new note of respect, "would you show me more?" Back aboard the Meridian flagship, Admiral Zixtal sat in their private quarters, surrounded by holographic displays showing hundreds of human gaming streams. Their membrane had settled into a deep purple of intense concentration as they watched countless humans, young and old alike, casually mastering principles that had taken the Confederation centuries to develop. "Analysis complete, Admiral," Lieutenant Venra reported, their own antennae twitching with barely contained excitement. "We've identified over 3,000 distinct space simulation titles currently active in human entertainment networks. The most popular ones have player bases exceeding 50 million users." Zixtal gestured with one crystalline hand, bringing up footage from something called Stellar Championship Series. The video showed a tournament where teams of humans competed in complex space warfare scenarios, complete with professional commentators analyzing their tactics. "Look at this," they said, freezing the frame. "This team just executed a perfect cascade maneuver, but they call it a triple helix defense. They've independently developed our most advanced fleet formations and turned them into scoring opportunities in a game." Dr. Meltic, their cultural advisor, stepped closer to examine the footage. According to their social media networks, these competitive players spend up to 12 hours daily practicing scenarios. Many start as young as 5 or 6 Earth years old. "Show me the learning progression data," Zixtal commanded. New displays materialized, showing how humans advance through increasingly complex challenges. What started as simple orbital mechanics games for children evolved into sophisticated simulations of everything from emergency responses to multi-ship combat scenarios. "Most fascinating," Venra noted, "is their modding community. Players create their own scenarios, sharing them freely with others. They're constantly innovating, testing new approaches, finding solutions we never considered." The Admiral's membrane rippled with shades of realization. They've created a self-improving system. Each generation builds upon the discoveries of the last, all under the guise of entertainment. They paused, watching a video of young humans collaborating on a particularly complex rescue mission, and because it's presented as a game, they approach problems without the burden of formal doctrine. "Sir," Dr. Meltic interjected, "you should see this." They brought up a new display showing a virtual reality setup in what appeared to be a human home. They've begun implementing full immersion systems. The hardware is crude by our standards, but the neural adaptation rates are exceptional. Children who use these systems regularly show enhanced spatial awareness and tactical thinking, even outside the simulations. Zixtal's secondary eyes tracked a scrolling feed of player statistics, while their primary set focused on a global map showing active users. "How did we miss this in our preliminary studies? We were looking for formal training programs," Venra admitted. Military academies, space flight schools, tactical databases. We never considered. Their antennae drooped slightly, that their most effective training would be disguised as children's entertainment. The Admiral expanded a particular dataset that had caught their attention. It showed the correlation between popular gaming mechanics and actual spaceflight innovations. Time and again, solutions discovered by players in simulations have been quietly adopted into real spacecraft designs. They're not just training pilots and tactical officers, Zixtel said softly. They're training their entire civilization. Every human who has ever touched these games has contributed to their species' understanding of space warfare and exploration. A notification pulsed in their neural display. Another gaming stream starting, this one featuring a familiar username. Stardancer 42. Sarah was online, attempting a scenario that simulated navigating through a quantum filament field. Record everything, the Admiral commanded. Every stream, every tournament, every training progression. I want to understand exactly how they've managed to turn the most complex challenges of space travel into. Their membrane flickered with amused disbelief, something their children do for fun. Dr. Meltick's antennae curled in concern. Admiral, if the Confederation learns the full extent of this. They must learn, Zixtal interrupted. Because we've been asking the wrong question. We wondered how humans achieved such mastery with primitive technology. But the real question is, what happens when they finally build ships as advanced as ours? They all watched in silence as Sarah's ship danced through the quantum filaments, her casual narration explaining techniques that Confederation scientists were only beginning to theorize. In the corner of the screen, a small counter showed how many other young humans were watching, learning, and preparing to surpass her achievements. The implications were both thrilling and terrifying. Admiral Zixtel stood in the observation lounge of Earth's primary spaceport, their crystalline form reflecting the glow of approaching and departing vessels. They had arranged this meeting through diplomatic channels, curious to learn more about the young human who had sparked their investigation. Sarah's parents had agreed, though they seemed puzzled by an alien admiral's interest in their daughter's gaming habits. The family's arrival was announced by Sarah's excited voice. "Look, Mom, that's a Helios-class cargo hauler. They just added those to the simulator last week, but seeing one up close is so much cooler." Zixtel turned to see Sarah practically bouncing toward the observation window, her parents following with bemused expressions. The girl wore a shirt bearing the logo of Stellar Frontier, the space simulation game she favored. "Admiral." Sarah's mother stepped forward, extending her hand in the human greeting custom. "I'm Dr. Emily Chen, lead interface designer at Orbital Dynamics. This is my husband, Michael Roberts." The Admiral's antennae twitched with sudden recognition. "Orbital Dynamics, you design control systems for civilian spacecraft." "That's right," Emily smiled. "Though lately we've been focusing on standardizing interfaces across different vessel classes, making everything more intuitive. Like the games," Sarah interjected, still watching ships through the window. "Mom uses my feedback on the simulator controls to help design real ship interfaces. She says kids are better at finding weird solutions because we don't know what's supposed to be impossible yet." Zixtel's membrane shifted to a shade of dawning comprehension. "You deliberately pattern your spacecraft controls after entertainment systems." Michael nodded, putting a hand on Sarah's shoulder. "It started as a cost-saving measure, actually. Why design completely new interfaces when we already had millions of humans familiar with standardized simulation controls? Most of today's cargo pilots grew up playing space games, including yourself," the Admiral inquired. "Third-generation space hauler," Michael grinned. "Though Sarah here is already better at orbital mechanics than I was at twice her age. Show the Admiral your certification, honey." Sarah proudly pulled up a holographic display from her personal device. "I got my junior navigator rating last month. Dad lets me plot our cargo routes now, though he still has to approve them before filing the flight plans." Zixtal's secondary eyes zoomed in on the certification details, while their primary set watched Sarah excitedly point out different ships in the spaceport's traffic pattern. You allow a child to plot actual spacecraft trajectories. Her simulator scores are higher than most professional navigators, Emily explained. The certification program was originally designed to evaluate game performance, but we found it translated perfectly to real space operations. The physics engine in Stellar Frontier is actually more demanding than real conditions. Yeah, because real ships have better safety margins, Sarah added matter-of-factly. In the game, you have to account for every little thing manually. Dad says I'm better at emergency procedures because I practiced them for fun. The Admiral's neural implants pinged as they made another connection. The rescue scenario you showed me in the arcade. You've performed similar operations in actual space. Michael nodded proudly. 3 times now. Mostly small stuff, stranded shuttles, debris cleanup. But Sarah's game experience meant she already knew exactly what to do. These days, most Space Guard training is done through simulator networks disguised as competitive gaming leagues. It's better that way, Sarah said, now using her hands to trace the path of a departing freighter. In the simulations, you can try crazy ideas without anyone getting hurt. Then, when something works really well, people start using it in real ships. Like that. She pointed to a vessel executing a complex docking approach. That's the Singapore slingshot. My friend Tracy invented that in a tournament last year, and now everyone uses it because it saves like 20% on maneuvering fuel. Zixtal watched the ship complete its docking procedure using a technique that had indeed originated in what humans considered a game. Their membrane rippled with a complex mix of emotions as they realized the full implications of what humanity had achieved. They hadn't just created a training system. They had built an entire civilization where the line between simulation and reality, between play and preparation, had become beautifully, effectively meaningless. Every human child with access to these games was simultaneously a student and an innovator, pushing the boundaries of possible space operations through the simple act of having fun. The Admiral's antennae curled in what their species recognized as profound respect. "Sarah," they said softly, "would you like to show me how to play?" The first warning came as a ripple in space-time that every ship's sensors detected. Admiral Zixtal was aboard Earth's orbital diplomatic station, discussing simulation training protocols with human Space Force officials when the alert sounded. Multiple quantum signatures detected, the station's AI announced calmly. Configuration matches Meridian warships. Count: 37 vessels. They are not responding to identification requests. Zixtal's membrane paled to a sickly white. They recognized the attack pattern forming on the tactical displays. It was a standard Meridian subjugation formation, used to overwhelm primitive civilizations that resisted joining the Confederation. But this wasn't an authorized action. Rogue elements, they transmitted quickly to the human officials. Separatist faction. They're not acting under Confederation authority. The humans, surprisingly, didn't panic. Station Commander Chen, Sarah's mother, they realized, was already accessing a command terminal. Initiating Emergency Protocol Sierra Golf 7. All civilian vessels, this is not a drill. Gaming protocols are now live. Zixtal's antennae quivered in confusion. Gaming protocols. Their question was answered as the tactical display transformed. Its austere military interface shifted into something familiar. It looked exactly like the simulation games they'd been studying. Dozens of civilian ships lit up on the screen, their transponders now broadcasting standardized gaming identification codes. "Attention all pilots," Commander Chen announced, her voice steady. "The Stellar Defense Network is now active. This is a Type 3 scenario. Form up according to tournament protocols. This is not a simulation. Repeat, this is not a simulation." The Admiral watched in amazement as civilian vessels began moving with military precision. Cargo haulers, passenger liners, and private yachts smoothly organized themselves into defensive formations that perfectly mirrored competitive gaming strategies. "How many of those ships have weapons?" they asked urgently. "None," Commander Chen replied with a grim smile. "But they don't need them. Watch." The rogue Meridian fleet dropped out of quantum space in a perfect attack formation, their weapons charged. The commander of the Separatist force transmitted a booming message. "Primitive human vessels, surrender immediately or be destroyed. Your technology is no match for." They never finished the sentence. The civilian ships scattered in what appeared to be panic, but Zixtal's tactical training recognized the maneuver. It was a modified version of a popular gaming strategy called the Firefly Gambit, appearing to flee while actually moving into optimal positions. The Separatist ships, following standard pursuit protocols, found themselves suddenly entangled in a web of intersecting flight paths. Civilian vessels whipped past them at speeds that should have been impossible with their level of technology, their wakes creating gravitational eddies that disrupted the Meridian ship's precise formation. "This is incredible," Zixtal muttered, their antennae tracking multiple battles simultaneously. "They're using cargo ships as gravitational disruptors. The techniques are exactly like their games, but adapted for non-military vessels." A massive passenger liner suddenly cut its engines, spinning in a maneuver that would have pulped any Meridian crew with the G-forces. As it rotated, its emergency debris shields deployed, deflecting a weapons blast directly back at the attacking vessel. "That was the Singapore slingshot," a familiar voice said. Zixtal turned to see Sarah entering the command center with her father. "But they modified it to use the shield harmonics." "That's so cool." "Sarah, what are you doing here?" Commander Chen asked, though she didn't seem particularly surprised. "Dad's ship was docked for resupply when the alert came in," Sarah explained, her eyes darting across the tactical display. "Mom, look, they're setting up for a cascade defense. But they're using the mining ships wrong. The particle scoops need to be at a 43-degree angle to maximize the destruction field." Without hesitation, Commander Chen opened a channel. "Attention mining vessel cluster. Adjust particle scoop angle to 43 degrees on Sarah's mark." She nodded to her daughter. "Call it." Sarah stepped up to the console, as if she'd done it 1,000 times, which, Zixtal realized, she had. In the simulations, in the games, in all the hours of play that had actually been preparation for exactly this moment. "Mining control, on my mark," she said clearly, her voice carrying the same confidence she'd shown in the arcade. 3, 2, 1. The Admiral watched as humanity proved that their games had never been games at all. "Dad, we need to get to the ship," Sarah said, her eyes never leaving the tactical display. "The mining ships are drawing their formation apart, but there's a gap in the defense pattern. That's our usual slot in the Stellar Championship tournaments." Michael Roberts nodded, looking to his wife for confirmation. Commander Chen's fingers danced across her console, analyzing the situation. "She's right. Your cargo hauler's mass profile is perfect for the position. But Sarah," she hesitated for the first time since the crisis began. "Mom," Sarah said firmly, "I've run this scenario hundreds of times in the simulator. Sector championships last month. This was the exact loadout we were using." Admiral Zixtal's antennae twitched with sudden recognition. "The Proxima Challenge. Your solution won the tournament." "Exactly." Sarah's eyes lit up. "And our ship has the same cargo configuration right now. Deuterium tanks at 40%. Primary hull stressed to 83% normal load. It's actually better than the simulation parameters." Commander Chen made a decision. "Go, but you stay in contact the entire time." She pulled Sarah into a quick hug before returning to her command duties. "Orbital defense. This is control. Roberts Hauler designate Star Road is joining Defense Pattern Echo. Classification: Tournament Seed." As Sarah and her father rushed towards the docking bay, Zixtal followed. "You're putting a child into a combat situation," they observed, membrane flickering with concern. "No," Michael replied, helping Sarah into her flight suit with practiced ease. We're putting the third-ranked tactical pilot in the Sol system exactly where she needs to be. The fact that she's 12 is irrelevant. The docking tube connected with their ship, a standard cargo hauler that looked exactly like thousands of others plying the space lanes. But as they entered the bridge, Zixtal noticed something remarkable. The control layout was identical to the arcade pod where they'd first met Sarah. Standard interface protocol, Sarah explained, noticing their attention as she slid into the co-pilot's seat. Every civilian ship uses the same basic control scheme as the games. Makes it easier to maintain certifications. Her hands moved across the holographic displays, bringing systems online. Plus, muscle memory is muscle memory, whether it's real or simulation. Michael took the pilot's position. Star Road to control, we are flight ready. Sarah's running tactical. Confirmed, Star Road. Commander Chen's voice replied. Your slot in the pattern is open. Make it count. The cargo ship detached smoothly from the station, its engines pulsing in a precise rhythm that Zixtal recognized from Sarah's gaming streams. As they moved into position, the tactical situation was deteriorating. The Separatist fleet had adapted to the initial confusion, their superior weapons beginning to tax the civilian ship's defensive capabilities. They're using standard Meridian attack protocols, Zixtal observed. Predictable patterns designed to overwhelm primitive defenses through sheer force. Sarah's fingers flew across her tactical board. That's their mistake. Dad, set up for the Callisto weave. Everyone in the competitive scene knows the counter to that approach. Broadcasting maneuver coordinates to Defense Network, Michael confirmed. Just like tournament finals, kiddo. Call your shots. What happened next made Zixtal's membrane ripple with disbelief. Sarah began coordinating not just their ship, but the entire civilian defense network, calling out maneuvers using gaming terminology that every pilot seemed to instantly understand. Mining ships, execute Diamond Formation 6. Passenger liners, prepare for solar scatter. Haulers, we're their anchor point for the Io Gambit. The civilian ships moved like a single organism, their seemingly random movements forming patterns that disrupted the Separatists' carefully planned attack vectors. Every time the Meridian ships attempted to compensate, they found themselves caught in yet another tournament-tested strategy. Watch this, Sarah said with fierce concentration. Remember that asteroid shuffle I showed you in the arcade? Let's see how it works with real ships. The Star Road suddenly cut power, spinning in a complex pattern that seemed to defy physics. Around them, other civilian ships followed suit, their coordinated movements creating a gravitational lens effect that caught 3 Separatist vessels in a web of intersecting force vectors. Just like the simulations, Sarah whispered, her eyes bright with focus. Except this time, we're saving real lives. Admiral Zixtal watched in awe as this child, using skills honed in what everyone had thought was just a game, conducted a masterclass in space combat tactics, and they realized that humanity had achieved something the Confederation had never considered possible. They had turned their entire civilian space fleet into a defense force, commanded by champions whose only qualification was that they loved to play. Admiral Zixtal stood before the Confederation High Council, their membrane glowing with the formal hues of a diplomatic presentation. The chamber's crystalline walls reflected the light from dozens of council members' bioluminescent forms as they reviewed the footage from Earth. Honored Council, Zixtal began. I stand before you not just to report on first contact with humanity, but to recommend an immediate revision of their technological classification. They gestured and holographic displays materialized throughout the chamber, showing scenes from the failed Separatist attack. These images show civilian cargo haulers and passenger ships defeating our most advanced warships, one council member observed, their antennae rigid with disbelief. How is this possible? Because, Zixtal replied, we fundamentally misunderstood humanity's approach to space warfare. We searched their military databases, analyzed their formal training programs, and concluded they were primitives. We never thought to look in their children's gaming rooms. The Admiral brought up new footage, split-screen images showing Sarah playing in the arcade alongside recordings of the actual battle. The maneuvers matched perfectly. This human child, they continued, like millions of others, has spent more hours practicing space combat than most of our decorated veterans. They've turned warfare into a game, yes, but in doing so, they've achieved something remarkable. They've made mastery of space combat as natural as breathing. The council chamber erupted in overlapping shades of concern and confusion. Zixtal waited for the commotion to settle before continuing. During the attack, I witnessed something extraordinary. Their entire civilian fleet switched from commercial operations to coordinated defense in less than 6 minutes. Every ship captain, every navigator, every cargo handler knew exactly what to do, because they'd been practicing their whole lives in what they thought was just entertainment. New displays showed the gaming tournaments, the global leaderboards, the endless streams of humans sharing and perfecting their techniques. Their games have created a civilization where every civilian is a potential tactical officer, where children casually master concepts that took us centuries to develop, where millions of humans spend their leisure time solving complex space combat scenarios for fun. The Admiral's membrane shifted to deeper, more serious hues. And most importantly, they'd done this without the trauma of actual combat. While we learned our tactics through centuries of warfare, they've developed their skills through play. Their innovations come not from desperation or fear, but from the simple joy of exploration and competition. Footage from the battle's aftermath appeared, civilian ships seamlessly returning to commercial operations, their crews celebrating their victory as if they'd just won another tournament. The separatists failed, Zixtal declared, because they approached this as a military operation against primitives. They'd never understood that every human ship, every crew member, every child with a gaming console represents centuries of refined combat experience, earned without a single actual casualty. The Admiral's final display showed Sarah, back in the arcade just days after the battle, teaching younger children how to perform the maneuvers she'd used to help save Earth. We must understand this, Zixtal emphasized. Humanity hasn't just developed a new way of training space combat. They've created a culture where the line between simulation and reality, between play and preparation, has become meaningless. Their games are real. Their reality is a game. And this makes them more formidable than any traditionally trained military force. One council member's membrane flickered with worried colors. Are you suggesting they pose a threat? No, Zixtal replied firmly. I am suggesting they offer us an opportunity. Humanity has discovered something we never considered, that the best way to master the deadliest skills is to make them fun, that you can turn an entire civilization into an unbeatable defense force, not through conscription or fear, but through play. The Admiral's form settled into the formal hues of a final recommendation. I propose we establish an immediate cultural exchange program, focusing on their gaming networks, not to learn their combat techniques, though those are impressive, but to understand how they've achieved something far more valuable. They've made the hardest lessons of space travel into something their children master for fun. In the silence that followed, Zixtal's membrane rippled with one final thought. After all, any species that can turn the deadliest skills in the galaxy into a children's game is either going to be humanity's greatest friend or their most terrifying enemy. I suggest we make sure it's the former.